Every afternoon, when the sun began to sink behind the hill, Samuel followed the same narrow path lined with cypress trees toward the farthest corner of the old cemetery. The gravel crunched beneath his shoes, a lonely rhythm that matched the beat of his weary heart. He carried the same small bouquet every time. White daisies, her favorite. His fingers, rough from years of work, trembled as he clutched them tightly. The smell of damp earth and wilted flowers filled the air, and each step closer to the small grave felt heavier than the last. He didn't need to look to know exactly where it was. He could find it with his eyes closed. His daughter's resting place. The only thing in his world that still made sense. Lucia. The name was carved in delicate script across the weathered stone, surrounded by a few toys now faded by rain and sun. He knelt down carefully, the old pain flaring in his knees, and placed the daisies at the base of the tomb. His hands lingered on the cold marble, tracing the letters as though touching her again. "Mi vida," he murmured, his voice shaking. "I brought your favorites. Just like always." The silence pressed against him, thick and merciless. His chest ached as memories washed over him, her laughter echoing in the backyard, her small hands covered in paint, the way she'd run to him every evening shouting, "Papa's home." Now there was only silence. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against the stone, and his shoulders began to shake. "I should have protected you," he whispered, the guilt heavy in every word. "If I hadn't been late that night, if I hadn't answered that call." His voice broke, dissolving into quiet sobs. The air around him felt colder, tighter, as if the world itself mourned with him. A single tear slid down his face and landed on the marble, mingling with the remnants of last night's rain. As the wind whispered through the trees, carrying faint scents of grass and dust, Samuel lifted his head slightly, eyes red and glassy. He looked up at the sky, painted in bruised hues of orange and purple, and for a moment he thought he saw movement, a flicker of light, a silhouette of a little girl running through the fields. But when he blinked, it was gone, replaced by the stillness of dusk. He let out a long, trembling sigh and whispered again, "I miss you, Lucia." Every day. The sun disappeared completely, leaving him alone with the fading light, the grave, and the silence that had become his only companion. That evening, the cemetery was cloaked in an eerie calm. The last traces of daylight bled into the horizon, and a veil of mist began to rise from the ground. Samuel sat on the damp grass beside the grave, his old coat wrapped tightly around him, though the chill in the air had little to do with the cold. He was talking softly to the stone, as he always did, telling Lucia about the little things, how the neighbor's cat had kittens, how the old radio finally stopped working, how quiet the house had become without her laughter. His words were broken, drifting like whispers carried by the wind. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," he said, his voice trembling. "I wake up and I swear I still hear your footsteps in the hallway. Sometimes I set the table for two. I forget you're gone, and then it all comes back." His fingers traced the carved name again, lingering on the curve of each letter as if they might anchor him to her. The air grew heavier, the wind slowing to a stop. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, in the stillness, it happened. A soft, trembling voice came from behind him. "Papa!" Samuel froze. The sound sliced through him like lightning. His heart skipped, then pounded so hard it felt like his ribs would crack. That voice, sweet, clear, filled with innocence, he knew it better than his own. His entire body went cold. For a moment, he couldn't move. The only sound was his shallow breathing and the soft rustle of the trees. Slowly, terrified, he turned his head. Just beyond the grave, a few steps away, stood a small figure bathed in the pale glow of the moon. She wore a white dress that shimmered faintly, her dark hair tangled and loose around her shoulders. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. His knees weakened. "Lucia?" The word escaped him like a prayer, a plea, a cry all at once. The little girl tilted her head, a faint, sorrowful smile curling her lips. "Why do you cry for me every day?" she asked, her voice barely louder than the whispering wind. Her eyes, those same brown eyes that once overflowed with life, now glistened with something softer, deeper, almost otherworldly. Samuel's tears began to fall again, his hands trembling as he reached toward her. "Because you're gone," he said, choking on the words. "Because I failed you." His voice cracked under the weight of his guilt. The girl took a slow step closer, her bare feet silent on the grass. "You didn't fail me, Papa," she murmured gently. "You loved me. That's all I ever needed." He wanted to run to her, to hold her, but his body refused to move, caught between disbelief and desperate hope. The air pulsed with something electric and unreal, as if time itself had stopped just to let this moment happen. Her small face glowed softly against the darkness, and in her eyes, Samuel saw everything he had lost, yet everything he still carried inside him. Samuel's chest tightened as he stared at the figure before him. His breath came in shallow, uneven gasps, his heart racing as if trying to catch up with what his eyes were seeing. The little girl, his Lucia, stood only a few feet away, her small hands clasped in front of her, her white dress fluttering gently though the wind had stilled. The cemetery was wrapped in silence, the kind that pressed on the ears, thick and suffocating. Only the faint hum of crickets broke the stillness. The moonlight touched her face, making her seem both real and unreal, like a memory given form. Samuel took a trembling step forward. "Lucia, if this is a dream, don't let me wake up," he whispered. His voice cracked, breaking under the weight of longing. The girl smiled faintly, her eyes filled with tenderness. "It's not a dream, Papa," she said softly, her voice echoing around them, delicate as glass. "But you have to stop crying for me." His throat tightened painfully. "How can I?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Every day without you feels like dying again." His knees gave way, and he sank onto the cold ground, his hands covering his face as sobs tore through him. The sound of his grief filled the space, raw and desperate, and for a long moment the only thing he could hear was his own heartbreak. Then, warmth. A small hand, impossibly familiar, rested over his. Samuel froze, afraid to move, afraid the touch would vanish. Slowly, he lowered his hands and looked up. Lucia was kneeling in front of him, her tiny palm against his chest, right over his heart. "I'm not in that grave, Papa," she said gently. "I'm here. I never left you." Her eyes shimmered like morning dew, filled with a light that seemed to come from within. He stared at her, tears streaming freely now, his lips trembling. "I don't understand," he whispered. "I saw," she shook her head, smiling through her sadness. "You saw my body, not me. You carry me here." She pressed her hand harder against his chest. "In every breath, every memory, every kindness you give. That's where I live." Her words were calm, but each one hit him with unbearable tenderness. The air around them began to shift, the mist rising higher, curling around the tombstones like smoke. Lucia's form flickered faintly, as if the night were trying to pull her away. Samuel's eyes widened. "No, please, don't go," he pleaded. She leaned forward and wrapped her small arms around him. For a heartbeat he felt it, her warmth, her weight, the soft scent of her hair, so real it broke him all over again. "Don't visit my tomb any more," she whispered into his ear. "You don't need to find me here. Live, Papa. Live for both of us." And then she was gone. The wind surged suddenly, swirling around him, scattering the daisies across the grass. Samuel's arms hung empty, trembling. The mist began to fade, revealing the grave once more, silent, still, untouched. He sat there for a long time, staring at the spot where she had been, his heart pounding in disbelief and wonder. The ache in his chest was still there, but something had shifted. The air felt lighter, the silence no longer cruel but peaceful. When he finally stood, the tears on his face were no longer just grief. They were release. He looked one last time at the grave, his lips forming a trembling smile. "I'll live, my little one," he whispered into the night. Then he turned and walked away, his steps slow but steady, the faintest warmth glowing in his heart, Lucia's warmth, guiding him home.